Have you ever wondered why you simply can't get interested in football, even when it seems the entire world is hypnotized by this sport? While millions gather around screens, you feel like a stranger, an outsider. What if I told you that this apparent flaw in your social programming is actually a powerful message from your collective unconscious? Carl Jung, the revolutionary psychoanalyst, revealed that our deepest aversions hide secrets about our true spiritual nature. Your indifference to football isn't just a simple preference. It's a call from your soul, an invitation to a journey of individuation that few have the courage to embark on. In the next few minutes, I'll reveal what your disinterest in the world's most popular sport says about your life purpose, and how this might be the key to unlocking your true spiritual potential. In the quiet moments when everyone around you cheers wildly at a goal on TV, have you felt that strange sense of disconnection? That feeling isn't just about sports preference. It runs much deeper into your psyche. The collective fascination with football represents what Jung called a mass phenomenon, where millions of people project their unconscious desires onto the same symbolic activity. This massive projection creates what we might call the spectator archetype, a psychological pattern that reveals how humans seek meaning through shared experiences. The football stadium itself becomes a modern temple, where weekly rituals unfold with almost religious devotion. The painted faces, the sacred jerseys, the hymns and chants. All of these elements mirror ancient tribal gatherings where communities reinforced their bonds. When you find yourself unable to participate in this collective experience, your unconscious is actually highlighting your relationship with the shadow, those aspects of humanity that remain hidden beneath the surface. Jung believed that large groups tend to operate at a lower level of consciousness than individuals. The roaring crowd becomes a single organism, releasing emotions that many people suppress in their daily lives. Rage, ecstasy, aggression, and tribal loyalty all find socially acceptable expression during a match. Your disinterest suggests that your psyche seeks different channels for these energies. The shadow isn't negative, it's simply hidden. Football's aggressive competition, territorial defense, and physical dominance represent primal human drives that modern society often denies. Most spectators unconsciously use the game to experience these drives safely, from a distance. Your lack of connection to this outlet means you must be processing these energies differently, perhaps more consciously or through other means. Think about what happens during big tournaments. Crime rates often drop while games are on, only to spike afterward, especially if the favored team loses. This pattern demonstrates how football serves as a pressure valve for collective tension. Your immunity to this effect suggests that you may have developed more individualized ways of managing psychological pressure. The collective shadow also contains our cultural myths about masculinity, success, and tribal belonging. Football distills these elements into a neat 90-minute package, allowing millions to engage with these themes without conscious awareness. Your disconnect points to a different relationship with these cultural forces, perhaps a more questioning stance toward conventional values. Jung would likely view your disinterest as a sign of psychological differentiation, the process of becoming more consciously distinct from collective patterns. This doesn't make you better or worse than football fans, just differently oriented. While they find catharsis and connection through shared experience, you may be developing greater awareness of your own unique psychological landscape. The colors, symbols, and anthems of teams tap into the same psychological mechanisms that nations and religions use to create belonging. These elements speak to deep unconscious needs for identity and community. Your resistance to their pull suggests that your sense of belonging may be anchored elsewhere, perhaps in less visible communities or in values that transcend local allegiances. This disconnect isn't about intellectual superiority, Many brilliant minds love football passionately. Rather, it points to differences in how your unconscious processes symbolic content. Jung might suggest that your psyche is drawing energy away from collective expressions to fuel more individual development, a subtle but powerful redirection of psychological resources. As we'll explore next, this differentiation from mass consciousness represents an important step on what Jung called the path of individuation, the journey toward becoming more fully yourself. This resistance to football's magnetic pull isn't just a quirk of personality, it may be a signpost on your journey of individuation. Jung defined individuation as the process of becoming psychologically individual, distinct from general collective psychology. Your natural turning away from the world's most popular sport could actually be your soul's quiet rebellion against unconscious conformity. Imagine individuation as swimming upstream while the crowd floats downstream. It requires energy, awareness, and sometimes discomfort. The pressure to join in watching games, to participate in Monday morning discussions about yesterday's match, creates small moments of social tension. These tensions are growth points, opportunities for greater self-awareness about your unique psychological makeup. Jung observed that the path to psychological wholeness often begins with separation. In ancient myths, the hero typically leaves the village before finding treasure. Your disinterest in football may represent this symbolic departure from collective patterns, not in physical space, but in psychological orientation. You've unconsciously chosen a different path from the well-worn trail of sports fandom. The process involves recognizing projections. Football fans project heroic qualities onto players, tribal identity onto teams, and moral narratives onto competitions. These projections can be powerful and meaningful, but your psyche has withdrawn these projections, perhaps to reclaim that energy for internal development. This withdrawal isn't a conscious choice, but a natural movement of your deeper self. Mass enthusiasm often drowns out the quieter voice of individual calling. During World Cup season, when entire nations seem consumed by the tournament, continuing to follow your own interests requires psychological fortitude. This resistance builds what Jung would call a stronger container for consciousness, the capacity to hold your own experience amidst powerful collective currents. Jung noted that people frequently sacrifice individual development for collective belonging. The discomfort of standing apart feels threatening to our tribal instincts. Yet your natural disinterest in football suggests that your unconscious values individuation more than easy belonging. This orientation isn't chosen. It emerges from your unique psychological structure. The struggle between individual development and collective harmony appears in all cultures. Football's global appeal crosses almost all social, economic, and cultural boundaries, making it an especially powerful expression of collective consciousness. Your immunity to this appeal indicates a strong countercurrent in your psyche, an unconscious prioritization of individual development. This isn't to suggest that football fans aren't individuated. Many deeply individuated people love sports. Rather, your particular path of psychological development seems to require some degree of detachment from this specific collective experience. The energy others invest in following teams and players, you may be channeling into other aspects of self-development. Jung emphasized that individuation isn't about becoming isolated. Instead, it means relating to the collective from a place of greater consciousness. Your relationship with football culture, appreciating it from a distance without being absorbed by it, might exemplify this conscious relationship. You can understand its importance to others without needing to participate directly. This journey toward psychological individuality connects deeply with the next dimension of your disinterest in football, the balance of masculine and feminine energies within the psyche. As we'll explore in our next section, The heavily masculine symbolism of football reveals important patterns in how you process these complementary forces within yourself. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the Sim Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. The football field presents a world dominated by masculine energy. Strong bodies clash in competition, aggression flows openly, and strategic thinking merges with physical power. This intense display of masculinity speaks directly to something Jung identified as central to our psychological makeup: the balance between masculine and feminine energies within each person, regardless of their biological sex. Your response to football offers a fascinating window into how these energies operate in your inner world. Jung called the feminine aspect of a man's unconscious the anima, and the masculine aspect of a woman's unconscious the animus. These inner counterparts help create psychological wholeness. Football, with its emphasis on masculine traits like competition, hierarchy, and physical dominance, provides a powerful outlet for engaging with these energies. Your disinterest suggests you might be accessing these qualities through different channels. Consider how football games revolve around conquering territory, dominating opponents, and achieving victory. These themes connect with archetypal masculine energy. Most spectators unconsciously participate in these energies through their emotional investment in the game. Your distance from this engagement points to a different relationship with these forces within yourself, perhaps a more integrated or differently expressed connection to masculine energy. At the same time, football culture often lacks expressions of what Jung would consider feminine psychological qualities: receptivity, emotional nuance, intuitive understanding, and cooperative rather than competitive achievement. Your disinterest might reflect a psyche that seeks more balance between these complementary energies, rather than the predominantly masculine expression found in sports. The passionate fan experiences a kind of psychological possession during games, swept up in emotions that seem larger than individual control. Jung would see this as a kind of unconscious participation with collective archetypes. Your immunity to this possession suggests a different relationship with these archetypal energies, perhaps a more conscious engagement rather than unconscious submersion. Think about how football commentators describe players with typically masculine terms: brave, powerful, dominant, aggressive. The entire narrative framework reinforces traditional masculine virtues. Your disconnect from this narrative might indicate that your understanding of strength and virtue includes a broader range of qualities, including those typically associated with feminine consciousness. Jung believed that psychological development in midlife often involves integrating these opposite gender energies more fully. Men become more comfortable with their inner feminine aspects, while women more consciously embrace their masculine side. Your natural distance from hyper-masculine sporting culture could indicate an earlier or more natural integration of these complementary forces. The football stadium itself resembles ancient arenas, where masculinity was publicly performed and celebrated. This connection to historical patterns of gender expression runs deep in our collective unconscious. Your disinterest suggests your psyche may be oriented toward newer emerging patterns of gender integration rather than these ancient polarized expressions. This isn't about rejecting masculine energy, it's about how that energy finds expression in your life. Rather than accessing it through vicarious participation in competitive sports, you might express these same energies through creative work, intellectual pursuits, or different forms of physical activity that feel more integrated with your whole self. As we'll explore next, this unique psychological orientation places you on what Jung might call the hero's journey, but one that follows a less traveled path than the conventional routes mapped out by society. Your disinterest in football represents not a rejection of the collective experience, but rather a call toward a different kind of heroic development. The hero's journey appears in myths worldwide. Ordinary people called to extraordinary paths, often reluctantly at first. Jung saw this pattern as reflecting our psychological development. Your disinterest in football places you in the position of what we might call the reluctant hero, someone whose spiritual path requires standing apart from collective passions that others embrace without question. This reluctance doesn't mean resistance to growth. Rather, it reflects the natural hesitation we feel when called to follow inner guidance instead of external signals. The hero in myths often initially refuses the call to adventure, preferring the comfort of the familiar. Similarly, you might sometimes wish you could simply enjoy football like everyone else, fitting in seamlessly with social conversations and shared excitement. Jung believed that authentic spiritual development requires periods of solitude and detachment from collective enthusiasms. The alchemists, whom he studied extensively, called this stage the nigredo, or blackening, a time of separation that feels uncomfortable but creates space for deeper transformation. Your natural detachment from sports culture creates this psychological space for different kinds of growth. Consider how football fandom creates instant connection between strangers. Two people wearing the same team jersey immediately feel kinship. This easy belonging offers real psychological benefits, yet your path seems to require a more challenging route to connection, one based on conscious choice rather than tribal identification. This path demands more awareness, but potentially leads to deeper relationships. The reluctant hero must learn to trust internal guidance over external validation. When everyone around you gets excited about an upcoming game and you feel nothing, you're being asked to honor your authentic response rather than feign enthusiasm. This small act of truthfulness represents a significant step on the spiritual path that Jung described, valuing inner authenticity over social harmony. Ancient spiritual traditions worldwide recognize the need for some individuals to step back from collective activities to serve different functions in society. Shamans, mystics, and wisdom keepers often lived at the edges of their communities, not fully participating in all tribal activities. Your natural distance from sports enthusiasm might place you in this lineage of people who serve as bridges between everyday consciousness and deeper awareness. This position carries both gifts and challenges. The gift is greater freedom from unconscious collective influences, allowing clearer perception of patterns others might miss. The challenge is the occasional loneliness of not sharing widely valued experiences. Jung would see both aspects as essential to your particular path of development, neither better nor worse than more collective journeys, just different. The reluctant hero eventually discovers that what initially seemed like a burden, standing apart from the crowd, becomes a source of unique strength. Your disinterest in football, which might sometimes feel like a social disadvantage, actually creates space for developing capacities that might remain dormant if you were fully absorbed in sports culture. This doesn't mean rejecting community entirely. Jung emphasized that true individuation leads back to more authentic collective engagement. Your journey might involve finding communities that resonate more deeply with your authentic interests, rather than joining the largest or most visible groups. These connections, though perhaps fewer, often prove more meaningful. As we'll see in the next section, this unique stance toward collective passions creates opportunities for recognizing synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that Jung saw as glimpses of a deeper order connecting psyche and world. Your distance from the dominant narrative of sports allows you to notice patterns and connections that might otherwise remain invisible. Have you ever noticed how certain themes keep appearing in your life, as if the universe were trying to tell you something? Jung called these meaningful coincidences synchronicity, events connected not by cause and effect, but by shared meaning. Your persistent disinterest in football, despite its cultural dominance, represents a synchronistic pattern worth examining for deeper messages about your spiritual path. Synchronicity often appears at important junctures in our development. When something as universal as football fails to capture your interest, this persistent pattern points to a different alignment of your inner compass. While millions feel drawn to stadiums and screens, something in your unconscious consistently pulls in another direction. This isn't random, it's a signpost worth following. Jung observed that synchronistic events often cluster around archetypal themes active in our lives. The repeated experience of feeling disconnected from football enthusiasm represents a pattern that reveals active archetypes in your psyche. Perhaps the seeker, the mystic, or the creator archetype exerts stronger influence in your psychological makeup than the warrior or tribesman archetypes that football so powerfully activates. Consider moments when you've tried to engage with football and felt nothing, no excitement when goals are scored, no tension during close matches. These flat emotional responses aren't failures, but messages from your unconscious about where your authentic energy naturally flows. Jung would see these as important clues about your individual path, steering you away from collective patterns that don't serve your development. Synchronicity often guides us toward people, experiences, and insights that nourish our authentic nature. Your disinterest in football has likely led you toward different communities, conversations, and activities that better align with your inner truth. These alternative paths, though less traveled, contain precisely the connections and experiences your soul needs for growth. The concept of synchronicity suggests that external events sometimes mirror internal psychological processes. The worldwide phenomenon of football, with its tribal divisions, competitive structure, and emotional intensity, presents a perfect mirror for exploring your relationship to these same elements within yourself. Your consistent disinterest reveals something about how these energies operate differently in your psyche. Jung noted that synchronistic events often feel numinous, charged with special significance beyond rational explanation. You might have experienced this quality when noticing the stark contrast between your indifference and others' intense emotional investment in games. This contrast creates a kind of psychological friction that draws attention to important differences in how people experience reality. Synchronicity often involves the activation of archetypal content from the collective unconscious. Football, with its heroic narratives, tribal identities, and ritual structures, powerfully expresses these archetypal patterns. Your immunity to their pull suggests that different archetypal energies are more active in your psyche, creating a natural orientation toward alternative forms of meaning. This doesn't mean forcing yourself to engage with football to fix this disconnect. Jung emphasized following the natural movement of psychic energy rather than imposing conscious direction against its flow. Your authentic path involves honoring this natural disinterest and recognizing the message it carries, that your soul seeks expression through different channels. As we move to our final section, we'll explore how this recognition of your unique psychological orientation leads to discovering and expressing your authentic self, transforming what might seem like a minor preference into a powerful tool for spiritual development. The journey we've traced, from recognizing the collective shadow to finding meaning in synchronistic patterns, leads to a central goal in Jungian psychology: the realization of the authentic self. This isn't just about accepting your disinterest in football. It's about recognizing this trait as a meaningful aspect of your unique psychological makeup and using it as a stepping stone toward greater wholeness. Jung distinguished between the persona, our social mask, and the authentic self that emerges through the individuation process. In a world where casual conversations often revolve around last night's game, Your disinterest might have forced you to develop either a false persona, pretending interest, or greater comfort with authentic self-expression. This small but repeated choice between authenticity and conformity represents an important training ground for larger life decisions. The development of the authentic self requires conscious attention to our natural inclinations and aversions. By noticing and honoring your disinterest in football rather than fighting against it, you participate in what Jung called active imagination, engaging consciously with unconscious content. This practice builds the psychological muscles needed for deeper self-awareness in all areas of life. Consider how your disinterest has shaped your social world. Perhaps you've naturally gravitated toward people who share your orientation or at least respect your difference. These relationships, formed around more authentic connections than shared sports enthusiasm, likely exhibit greater depth and meaning. Jung would see this as the authentic self naturally creating conditions for its own development through selective social engagement. The realization of the authentic self isn't about isolation from society, but about relating to collective life from a place of inner truth. Your relationship with football culture exemplifies this possibility. You can appreciate its importance to others without needing to share their enthusiasm. This stance of respectful differentiation creates space for both authentic self-expression and meaningful community connection. Jung observed that psychological energy withdrawn from one area naturally flows elsewhere. The energy others invest in following sports teams and players becomes available in your psyche for different pursuits. This redirection isn't a conscious choice, but a natural movement of libido, psychological energy, toward channels that better express your authentic nature. The development of authenticity often involves periods of feeling out of step with prevailing cultural patterns. These uncomfortable moments, when your natural responses differ from expected ones, serve as crucial growth opportunities. Each time you acknowledge your genuine disinterest rather than feigning enthusiasm, you strengthen your connection to your authentic self. This doesn't mean judging others for their passionate engagement with sports. Jung emphasized that different psychological types need different paths for wholeness. The authentic self recognizes both its own unique needs and the legitimacy of different paths for others. This balanced perspective allows respectful coexistence without pressure to conform or convert. The authentic self emerges gradually through countless small choices to honor inner truth over external pressure. Your consistent disinterest in football, maintained despite powerful cultural currents pulling in the opposite direction, demonstrates an important capacity for psychological independence. This same capacity serves all areas of spiritual development, from ethical choices to creative expression. Jung wrote about the self as the central organizing archetype of the psyche, a force that naturally moves us toward wholeness and integration. Your disinterest in football may be this self-archetype guiding you toward experiences and insights that balance your particular psychological makeup. This natural guidance system operates beneath conscious awareness, but becomes more accessible as we learn to trust our authentic responses. Consider the energy freed up by not following sports. While millions spend countless hours tracking statistics, watching games and discussing plays, you have that same time and attention available for other pursuits. This isn't about productivity. Jung would never reduce psychological processes to efficiency metrics, but about the natural flow of psychic energy toward what nourishes your particular soul. The authentic self doesn't develop in isolation, but through meaningful engagement with collective life. Your relationship with football culture, understanding it without being absorbed by it, models a mature relationship with all collective patterns. You can appreciate their power and meaning for others while maintaining the psychological space needed for your unique development. Jung noted that the authentic self often first appears in dreams or creative work before becoming consciously integrated. You might notice hints of your authentic nature in spontaneous interests, creative impulses, or persistent questions that occupy your mind. These glimpses of authenticity deserve attention and respect, even when they differ from mainstream enthusiasms like sports. The cultural pressure to enjoy football isn't just about entertainment preferences. It connects to deeper patterns of belonging and identity. Your natural immunity to this pressure suggests a psyche structured around different organizing principles. Perhaps you seek belonging through shared values rather than shared enthusiasms, or build identity around inner qualities rather than external affiliations. This orientation creates both challenges and opportunities. The challenge lies in navigating a world where sports talk creates instant rapport between strangers. The opportunity comes in developing deeper forms of connection based on more substantial exchanges. Both aspects shape your particular path of development, neither better nor worse than more conventional routes, just different. Jung believed that psychological wholeness requires integrating both collective and individual elements of the psyche. Your relationship with football exemplifies this integration. You can recognize its collective importance without losing your individual perspective. This balanced stance creates a vantage point from which to view other cultural phenomena with similar clarity. The authentic self, once consciously embraced, transforms from a source of occasional social awkwardness into a foundation for meaningful contribution. Your natural orientation away from mass enthusiasm creates space for perspectives our collective conversations desperately need. Viewpoints not swept up in prevailing emotions, but grounded in individual truth. This doesn't mean positioning yourself as superior to sports fans. Jung would see such inflation as counter to true development. Rather, it means recognizing your natural orientation as one valid perspective among many, but one that offers unique value precisely because it differs from the majority view. Jung observed that society advances not through uniform agreement, but through the creative tension between different psychological orientations. Your perspective as someone unmoved by sports enthusiasm contributes an important counterbalance to collective passions. This counterbalance isn't opposition, but complementary perspective. Like depth perception requires two slightly different viewpoints to create a complete picture. The ultimate transformation comes when you recognize that what might once have seemed like a social disadvantage, being unmoved by something that excites millions, actually represents a precious aspect of your unique contribution to the world. By following your authentic path rather than the widest road, you develop qualities and perspectives that our collective consciousness desperately needs, individual voices that speak from truth rather than echo prevailing opinions. Jung believed that society advances through the contributions of individuated people who bring conscious awareness to previously unconscious patterns. Your immunity to football's powerful appeal suggests a mind naturally oriented toward questioning collective assumptions, a capacity our world needs now more than ever. What began as a simple disinterest becomes, when consciously embraced, a spiritual strength that benefits not just your individual development, but the evolution of our shared human consciousness. The journey toward authenticity never ends. It's a continuous process of listening to inner truth and bringing it into relationship with collective life. Your disinterest in football represents just one signpost on this journey. But by paying attention to its significance, you practice the essential skill of reading your own psychological map. This attention to inner signals, developed through reflecting on seemingly minor preferences, builds the awareness needed for navigating life's most profound questions and choices.